Welcome to the What Now podcast, where we document our journey through chiropractic. Our goal is to give you, the new chiropractor, our firsthand experience in running a principled, cash-based practice right out of school. Join us as we bring you real perspective, lessons learned, and the leading names in the profession as we build the practices of our dreams. Yo, everybody. What is up? Welcome back to another episode of the What Now podcast. Spencer and Zach back in the booth for you guys today. Zach, we have an amazing guest.
In the booth.
Tell everybody who we have for them today.
Yeah. So today we are joined by none other than She Slays the Day. Joined by Dr. Lauryn Brunclik.
You said my name right.
You're welcome.
We practiced.
You're welcome. We practiced.
I was like waiting. I was like, this is the moment as a podcast host where you're like, shit, I didn't clarify how to spell their last name. You did a good job.
Thank you. We've only had one guest, right? We had to stop recording because I had no clue how to say the last name. But
that's okay.
That's okay. We're here. So we're joined, as you heard, by Dr. Lauryn Brunclik. She went to Northwestern Health Sciences University in Bloomington in 2010. Yes, that is a chiropractic school. Well, sort of. Mm-hmm. She did open right away after she graduated, and she currently owns Blue Hills Chiropractic, and she's owned that since 2010. I won't tell her where I was in life in 2010. Any specialties in practice? Dr. Lauryn specializes in pediatrics, prenatal, family, and is subluxation based. She has been married to her husband Kirby as well since 2010, and they have two girls ages 9 and 11. She's most excited to share whatever innately comes through. And so, Dr. Lauryn, thanks for coming on the What Now podcast. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me. I like the way you do that intro thing. I like it.
We don't plan it. We just kind of let it rip. So we like it too whenever it works for us. So, but anyway, Dr. Lauryn, what's up? Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about I think one of the biggest things that I wanted to hear about you is like kind of your story about why you started She Slays the Day and kind of like what the whole purpose behind the name is for, and like what's your whole mission like with the podcast, because to my knowledge, like you're one of the biggest chiropractic podcasts out there, definitely one of the most valuable. So tell everybody a little bit about your show.
Well, the funny thing about podcasts is by chiropractors is that you can never trust any of the numbers. So like, as far as I'll tell you, it's the biggest one, right?
That's right.
There's just a bunch of chiropractors who brag about their numbers and then they start a podcast and they're like, it's amazing. I see 1 million a week. So I had been in practice for 5-6 years, started coaching in not for Epic, but just like joined Epic. Mm-hmm. And at that time, there were just some like amazing people in there, like Tony Ebel, Denise Weber, Elise Rigney, Christy Wick, Jake Granacher. I mean, just like some amazing chiros. They really helped clean up my systems and procedures. I grew massively. I mean, I was pretty big up until that point, like high volume. And then we just went all cash. We went from like 80% insurance to 99% cash. Wow. Started using the scanner and then just exploded even more. And then I started after a couple of years coaching for them, nice. Unpaid, but just like running Zoom calls and helping other chiropractors. And I really loved that strategy component of just problem solving. My brain loves brainstorming about the smallest to biggest thing of just, even if I have no experience in it, just thinking about like, what if you did this or what if you did that? And so then kind of just time went on and I needed something different and I felt pulled, like I just needed to step away. So I left Epic without really knowing what was going to be next. And I am a distance runner, and where I get some of my best ideas is when I'm like running. And so for like the month following leaving Epic, I would come home and my husband's has a degree in consulting and finance and marketing. And he runs all of our businesses now, but he used to be corporate consultant. So I'd come home and I'd be like, okay, what if we did this? And he's like, and he's learned through like marriage therapy and books and stuff, not to like immediately like poke holes in my ideas. Cause I have a lot that he just learned to kind of like let them ride out, let it see if it sticks. So there's like 5-6 ideas over the month that they didn't really stick. And one day I came home and I was like, okay, so what if we have a podcast where people write in their problems and I just say my advice on it. And so he was like, interesting. All right. Just kind of waiting to see if it sticks because this is 2019. Everybody's starting a podcast. And it did stick. And so we, as far as the name goes, I'm the only she. Like, I'm like, gosh, I really, now that we're 5 years in, I hate that the word she is in there because we do have like probably somewhere around 20%, maybe more of a male audience. And I really don't identify as a coach just for females. Like, I really don't. The more I get into this realm of helping chiropractors, the more the advice is universal.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm the she that is slaying the day. So there wasn't really a ton of thought except for like, oh, that's fun. And then we started it right out of the gate. We had 1,000 downloads the first week, which is really rare within chiropractic. I had already agreed like publicly that I was going to start this. I had started the Instagram for it like a month before the first episode released. And so I'd already committed like, all right, June 6th is the first episode. And in that like time, I realized that the average podcast gets like 136 downloads. And I was like, oh, hell no. No, I'm not going to do this if that is all it's going to do. So luckily it's been really successful because if at any point I'd been like, my like ADHD brain would have moved on. So we're on like episode 253 or something like that. We've switched platforms like 3 different times now of where we're hosting. So to give you an exact number of downloads is really difficult. We're somewhere between 450 and 500,000, I think.
Wow.
It's just not like in a nice little thing because you have to like go and look at. So it's okay. Like, it's not like huge, but it's enough validation that I keep going and I get to it. I think, as you guys can relate, it opens up doors for conversations with people that
Yeah.
you normally wouldn't get to spend an hour talking to. And so
Yep.
just the guests and the conversations, I'm really, and like what I didn't want for it was another, because like sometimes we solve people's problems and sometimes we talk about shit I want to talk about. I just didn't want another podcast that was like, all right, here are the 10 questions we're going to ask you. And they were all the same questions that every guest asked. Like, I wanted it to just feel more conversational. Like, one of the hardest things that I've had, and I'm sure you guys have experienced this, is when you get like a really experienced speaker and they're just like hitting their keynotes and you're just like, and I won't make you drop names or anything like that. But it's just like, you almost have to like get them like to get
Yeah.
off their like speaking points so you can have conversations.
I think
So
I think on that point, that's something Spencer and I have both done our best to do, especially we call it our Dolo cast where it's just he and I. So it's not solo, but Dolo. But we try to be as transparent as possible. And I feel like that's something you also do a great job of, especially in chiropractic where it's, people say like, oh, I'm doing 500 visits a week. And then like, that's all you hear from them. Like, you don't know what's their systems or what their day 1 or their day 2 or what they're doing for marketing and these type of things. And it's like, I get that you're 500 a week and I probably should listen to you, but you're not giving me anything else to listen to about.
yeah, another big
So,
thing is like sharing. Like, people they don't love to share like kind of while they're going through something.
Yep.
It's just much more like, oh, I used to have that problem, but now I've fixed it. I'm a master at that.
Yeah. That's
I'm the
been what's
best.
been really cool about our show is because we've done it like week to week and I mean we started really right whenever we started up and I mean we really have had no idea what we're doing and we're still figuring it out, and so it's been really cool for me to go and listen back to ourself, like, and how the tone of your voice changes, the cadence in which you talk, the way that you communicate, the conviction in which you speak kind of grows as you grow. Like, my question for you, like in that, is how do you feel like your practice has influenced your podcast, and then how do you feel like your podcast has influenced your practice? Because I know for me, like, they go kind of hand in hand, like, because I do this just because I love it. I do both of them because I think they're fun and they're good add like to my life.
I would say that the podcast is almost that living documentary, kind of like you guys described yours, where if you look back on episodes, like, you can totally tell what kind of issues I'm trying to solve personally and professionally. Um, Like it'd be like, oh, okay. So like right now she is having that midlife crisis about this, or, so is just that whatever is going on in the practice, that's where conversations or questions will start to go, because it's like free coaching and therapy.
Yeah.
Like you're just like, this is my podcast now. So I get to ask the questions, and I'm going to ask the questions that pop up in my head. And the questions that pop up in my head are probably something I want to know the answer to.
And just like they say in school, right? Like if you feel like you have the question, there's probably 3 or 4 other people in the room that have the question, especially in chiropractic with your reach having 400 to 500,000 downloads. Like I guarantee you 500,000 people have had very similar questions that
Right.
you've had.
Somebody's got it.
Yeah.
And I'm not afraid to look stupid. Like that's something that
I know.
definitely happens in the podcast, but then also in real life. Like I feel like so much of my story has been shedding an ego of like, I need to have all the answers for my patients to respect me. And then that could have easily snuck into the podcasting world of like, I know everything, and and just not being afraid to be like, hold up, wait, can you explain that again? I still don't get it. Can you give me an example? And like, again, your listeners are really helpful or happy that you're doing that, because they're like, yeah, that didn't make sense to me either.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so with that, kind of diving in a little bit more, what have you've grown quite the personal brand. And with that, how have you also, built the podcast? You have 2 practices, correct? 2 practices, 2 kids, a husband. You're now doing coaching as well. Like, where does that drive come from? Like, where did you innately discover like what was going on?
Okay, I think there's like 3 or 4 questions in there, so I'll try
Yeah, I'm
and
sorry. I'm sorry.
answer which one. So I have set up so personal brand, not personality-based clinic. And that was a big thing, that if you are a solopreneur right now in your practice, whether you like it or not, you're probably building a personality-based clinic. So that was kind of one of the first hurdles I had to overcome in order to gain a lot more freedom. Was like, my practice needs to function if I'm gone for 2 weeks on vacation, or like if right now I'm working 2 full days and 1 half day, but normally it would only be 3 half days. But we're just waiting on a doc to come work for us. So like normally I would just be there because 3 afternoon shifts a week, because that's what I want. I am not super productive from like 2 to 5 when it comes to computer work. So like where I love finding that extra like juice in the squeeze is in adjusting. Like show up and I'm like, all right, this is fun. I just get to adjust people. So I love those afternoon shifts, and they're there right now because that's what's serving me. But first I had to make my practice, I had to break that personality-based practice so that you wouldn't have patients being like, oh, well, when is Dr. Lauryn here? Like I really prefer Dr. Lauryn, because as the owner, you're always going to have to overcome being the one. I mean, for the most part, unless you're a major dud, your patients, like they see you as the owner, and people associate the owner as the best, and people want the best. And so it's something that most practices are going to have to overcome at some point. And once you do, then it's fine. Like once you kind of train your patients. But like, so that was kind of the first thing. So then I said, like, I don't adjust a ton. I have a lot of free time that allows me to focus on the podcast, because it is really time consuming. But
Yep.
it's just finding that what fuels me. So if the podcast wasn't a creative outlet for me, and even with all the validation in the world, if it didn't soothe a part of my personality and my creative outlet and only drained me, I wouldn't keep doing it. And so like when you're talking about like, I think there was another question in there that was kind of like, how are you balancing it all?
Yeah.
Each one fills a different void. It's like a different hobby. My personality is also the type, I'm an Enneagram 3, and we turn hobbies into side hustles.
Yep.
So like it's like a
Yep.
legit personality flaw
It's the
that
greatest and worst thing in the world.
Absolutely. So like that's where I feel for some people who might look at, and Enneagram threes aren't like the best Enneagram, but like
I
I
think
don't
What's
know.
what's your
They're
wing?
up there.
they're
But like I feel like if you're like an Enneagram 9 or a 6 or any other, and you just like look at someone who like you're just like, oh my gosh, it just comes so natural to them. It kind of does. Like just like my husband is a 9, and his meditation and his like ability to not deal with anxiety and overthink things, like I look at that, I'm just like jealous, but it's
does
like there's
he
just certain things that come natural.
does he have a voice in his head? This is something I recently found out, is that 30%
Oh
of
yeah.
the population does not have a voice in their head.
I have yet
What?
to yeah, no.
Yeah,
And some
there's
people
people
can't
that don't
see
have a
things. So
when
yes, he definitely has a voice in his head. Yeah,
okay.
because somebody who doesn't have a voice in their head, I'm like, well, you don't count.
Yeah,
Like you
that
don't
doesn't
have
make
negative
sense.
self-talk all day long.
Lauren,
Yeah.
what's your wing on your Enneagram? Are you the 4 or 2?
2 unless I'm drinking, and then I wing
You're a
4
4.
hard.
Nice. Nice.
Nobody understands my plight.
Yeah.
But
I'm a
otherwise I'm a
4,
2.
wing 3. So
You're
I get
4.
that's me. Yeah. But okay, wait. So tell me about
Spencer
the
spends
whole
time in this
no
emotion.
voice in the head thing. That's really more I
And
feel like
some people can't see things, Zach. Did you know that?
Like they're
what?
blind or
Like, so if I say picture an apple,
oh,
some people literally cannot.
really?
Yeah.
Even
That's
though they've
crazy.
seen an apple.
Even though they've seen an apple.
They just can't like no mental imagery.
Right. So, like, reading a fictional book has got to
Yeah,
be boring as fuck.
yeah, you can't do that.
Okay, wait.
No.
So then if you can see and you can hear voices. Okay, so in chiropractic, like do you ever like feel like someone else's tension before you even touch them? Like do you ever like is
Oh,
that a
yeah.
thing for you?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
so then I know some people say like, oh yeah, like emotions have like a taste, like or something like that. So
Mm.
like, so do you think that like we have internal senses that we can all tap into, and like you have one that's heightened, or
I don't know if everybody has it. I definitely didn't start. So I don't have a taste or colors or anything like that. But on days where I am really tuned in, which is every day because I'm the best chiropractor in the world.
that's right.
No,
Locked
there are
in.
just certain days. I don't know if it's something the moon is doing or how close to my adjustment I am or how
The
close I am
eclipse
to my
coming up.
it's just like messages just come through. And I've learned to kind of trust them. It's not like an audible thing,
Hmm.
but it will just be like, are you pregnant? And then I've had multiple people be like, no. And I'm like, oh, okay. I wonder if you're getting your period. And they're like, yeah, I'm
Next
supposed
week.
to get it. And then their next visit, they're like, bitch, I was pregnant. How
Yeah.
did you know? And I was
Yeah.
like, I literally don't know. Sorry, my dog is like getting up from under my desk. I literally don't know. I couldn't do it for the first 8 years in practice. I found out my dad has erectile dysfunction through this unfortunate thing.
That's
Like,
weird.
it's unfortunate. Yeah, right. But
That's
I was
tough.
just like, I'm like, Dad, shoot. And I was like, like just messages come through whether you want them or not.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that
I'll have
happens to you
you.
in business too? Sorry to cut you off, Zach.
That was my question. Darn it.
What was your question? I didn't hear it.
Do you
Like
feel
you
like
brought
that you
that
get that same intuition in business?
Um, it's different. It's very, very different.
How
It
so?
is so like with the messaging with patients, it's like a thought bubble that pops in very much in my head. That's like, wait, what? Did I just like think that? Is that my thought or is that their
Hmm.
thought? And I've learned to start asking the questions because they're not always like I said, even with like the period example, it's not like sometimes it's like, are you pregnant? And they're like, no, I just got my period today. And it's like, oh, okay. I was picking up on your
Something hormone.
ovaries or
Yeah,
something,
yeah.
Um, but with the business stuff, that comes from the gut. So I am a
Hmm.
very gut centered person, where I almost have to get out of my head and like my head will perseverate and almost confuse me more. Whereas like leading with like, this is the decision that I think we need to make.
Yeah.
And that's really gut led.
So are you with being gut led? I assume you're with also Kirby being more consulting and having the degree in business, he's probably very much by the numbers. We make decisions based off
Mhm.
numbers, and you're very much like, well, my gut is saying this.
Yeah, you're going to be a really good husband. You picked up on one of our strifes because he takes it personal. Like
Yeah.
he has like the logic and like the data and I'm like, yeah, well, no offense, but I don't really care that the data says this is wrong. This is just what I feel is right. And he's like, but this is supposed to be a 50-50 business. And I'm like, well, sorry.
Well.
Yeah, you'll
And
think I'll do.
have you noticed with that over the last 14 years, how long did it take you to really trust that gut? Because that's something I'm at least currently learning to do, is trust more of, being that Enneagram 3, where I'm like, okay, I need to trust my gut a little bit more and not go based off numbers as much, because when I go off my gut, one, I feel better about it, but I also trust it more. And so is that something that you've had to build over time, or was that something that
It's a
you
great
just
question. So, by the way, just like podcast, does it make you feel really good when someone says that's a great question?
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
anytime I ask a question and my guest says, "Oh, I love," it's like there's this part of me that's like, "Yay!" Anyways, that was a legit good question, Zach.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I didn't start trusting it until I realized that impulsivity is also something that I really struggle with.
Yeah.
So when I make the best gut decisions, very rarely is it in that moment. Like,
Right.
so sometimes a decision has to be made like in the moment. But where I have learned is like when I have a moment to reflect and talk to Kirby, hear what he has like to add. And like a lot of times I do actually listen to him type of thing. I do want to clarify. Depending on who it is, I may consult if it's more podcast thing. I have different people within chiropractic that I might consult. If it's a decision for our practice, I'm touching in with like our lead CAs and my senior associate. And I'm just kind of gathering other people's 2 cents and just giving it a bit of time. And sometimes a bit of time might be 24 hours.
Yeah.
Sometimes it might be a few weeks. I've had things that have taken like a year plus to really work themselves out before like some of the stuff that we're doing in our practice right now. I was sitting kind of uncomfortably in this gray area of stewing. I would have called it indecisiveness, but just things needed to kind of fall into place more. And then when the gut says you have all the information, now you can go. Now I'm very aware of like when the green light happens.
Would
But
you
like it's a
mind?
struggle with like God too, because I feel like
Yeah.
everything in our timing as entrepreneurs,
Yep.
like we have a problem, we want to solve it right now.
Mhm.
And like our timeline as humans is just so short and insignificant. Like honestly, even imagine being 85 years old and looking back on your career and being like, but do you remember how year like 10 through 12 we were not profitable at all and we couldn't grow? Like
Right.
when you're in that, it's
Yeah.
just painful and it feels so hopeless or like it's never going to end. But then like you look back even at 85 and you're just like, oh, it was a blip. And I feel
Yeah.
like God is just the same thing where it's like, I know you want to take action right now,
Yeah.
but girlfriend, you haven't even met the person. Like you don't even have all the information yet.
I have two questions based off that, but I'll do better asking one at a time. So with that, can you provide an example? Like you mentioned, you had a couple things going on over the last year that you were really stewing on. What was one of those things, if you wouldn't mind sharing?
Yeah, no. So for the first 8 years of practice, we were chasing $1 million clinic and high volume. 1,000. We were chasing as many people. I didn't necessarily want to see. I didn't know if I want to see 1,000 a week. I don't know. What will make me like a worthy enough chiropractor, right? So you've got like these like get to high volume and then so see as many people as possible and get to seven
Yeah.
figures. And we did it, not to 1,000. We got to a point where we were like 700 and 3 clinics and 4 chiros, and we were past the $1 million mark. And I was kind of exhausted. Like, so up until that point, everything was on duplicating. So it was like, all right, and these are fake numbers, so I don't really know if they make sense, but like, let's say we were seeing 200 a week and bringing in 400,000. I don't know. And then so it was like, okay, well, I want to make more than that. So I need to get to 400 a week. And so we get to 400 a week and we're not to a million yet. We're at like, 750. And we're like, okay, well, yeah. And so like everything was on just like increase patient volume to increase the revenue. Without much assessment of like how many people it would take to run that monstrosity of a clinic. Like, no, that's not meant to be offensive to anybody who has multiple clinics and 5 doctors and 9 CAs.
That's crazy.
It's a lot.
That's like 100 employees. Like that's not really a small business.
It's a lot. Like we had so many employees that we needed an employee for HR.
Yeah.
Like that is when you get to that point, you're kind of like, so I'm paying someone like 50 grand a year to manage the employees. And like, so you kind of get yourself, you can, as a cash-based family practice, you can really get yourself painted into this corner where you are revenue-wise making a bunch, but you're like, why isn't it in my bank account?
Profit-wise is low.
Profit-wise sucks donkey balls. And so that's where we really had gotten to, where we're like, this is stupid. Now, if I loved managing that amount of people and I like still wanted 4 or 5 clinics, we could have made changes and then just grown from there. But like, I wasn't really like, there were just some big changes that needed to happen, and like realizing that I hadn't really asked myself what I want out of a practice. It was more of what would be impressive to other people. And so the last year and a half has been like, okay, what do I actually want? And what does that look like in profitability and OVA, and how many hours I'm working and how many doctors I have and how many CAs I have, and just a lot of those questions and like thinking through it that way.
Yeah, that's a big lesson that I've learned with my coaching with Steph Wigner, is like about that. Like everybody thinks like the golden goose is like 1,000 a week and $1 million, but really, dude, whenever you divide it up, you're like, that's like $18 an adjustment, and I don't like, it cost me more for that than lunch, and so that's crazy.
Yeah.
And a haircut. Yeah, my haircut's way more than that. But yeah, so I mean, I think that's like such a good thing, is that and us being like so young, we talk to a lot of people who are coming out of school, and they are always like, I just want to be crazy successful. Like I have to open my doors seeing 200 a week. And it's like, dude, what do you want? Like, do you want that? Do you know what it takes to do that? Have you talked to somebody who's done those things? But I'm glad that you shared that with us, because my question for you is, with staffing and like hiring people, because this is something Zach and I just kind of went through together in the past week. How are you? Yeah. Are you using your head, your heart, your gut? Because you don't want to build a personality-based business, but it does take certain personalities to run your business. And so what does it like that look like? How are you like bringing people onto the team, like feeling people out, like all those kind of things?
That is a very timely question, because I mean, we've hired a lot of CAs. And just so you guys, because when did you guys graduate?
April 22 and December.
Okay. 21. So like the last
since
2
COVID.
years has been wildly different hiring and retaining CAs and associates than prior. So like, you guys don't know any different. Oh, I'm feeling so like old and wise right now. Like when a Chiro talks about the Mercedes 80s, and I'm like, yeah, cool. I wasn't around. Well, I mean, I was in diapers, but so
like my favorite meme is like, my biggest regret in life is in 2006, I didn't buy a bunch of houses when I was in 4th grade. It's like,
yeah,
exactly. So part of our profitability crisis was realizing that, so even though we were using SCED and trying to automate as much as possible, there's also this like customer service, right? Like within the pediatric, we're just like Disney customer service for your patients, right? So like, just we would like talk at our annual meetings about how like what is above and beyond. And above and beyond means like you're helping that mom carry her kids out to the car and holding an umbrella, and then you whip stickers out of your pocket, and like that is above and beyond. And like anytime that my employees can execute that level of service, they know that that's what we want. But when you have 3-minute appointments, 2.5-minute appointments,
Yep.
there's a lot of people coming in. And so what ends up happening is like you can't be the one, like you're focused on giving high quality healthcare. So then you kind of lean into the CAs to make up for like the customer experience. But there's a lot of people. If you have a 15-minute appointment, you can have one CA deliver exceptional above and beyond service a lot of the times. If you've got a 3-hour shift where 90 people are coming through,
Yep.
you need 4 CA. And if you're running scans,
Oh, dude.
Right.
I know.
and if you are doing social media and like trying to capture moments, and if you're so for a while our one of our CAs communicate scans because we're understaffed for doctors, and so like just normal progress scans, our CA who's been with us for 7 years communicate scan. So like she was functioning and doing half intake for a new patient. So like we had basically like the equivalent of like a nurse happening, a scanner happening. So like really on our busiest shift when we had 5 CAs.
Wow.
For that to work really well, and 3 doctors. And that was just a lot. It's just a lot. And so like kind of going like, okay, well, how do how do we function without needing that? That's going to be different for each clinic. And I always want above and beyond. But sometimes above and beyond means that you are overstaffed profitability wise.
Yep.
Like for you to be, and I hate that. And I know there are certain chiros that are like, no, but like you have to be overstaffed in order to have that high volume clinic be Disney. Like you just do. And so it's realizing where like, okay, so maybe text messages don't get answered
right away
within 2 minutes of somebody texting. Maybe the voicemail says we are serving patients and we will check your messages at the end of shift and get back to you before we leave for the day. If you're a new patient, like request an appointment on our website. Like it's like, so it's just trying to figure out like where you can cut corners, because that's what it is like kind of going like, well, it's not ideal for someone to call your business and get a voicemail and not get if that's a new patient, you should have somebody right then and there, and a quality new patient phone call can be 10 to 20 minutes long. So you're sacrificing that new patient phone call maybe because you don't have someone who can spend 20 minutes away from the desk in a high volume shift. So it's just like, it's just thinking about it differently. And it's just like, what is the most important and how do you move the pieces around? And then how do you help facilitate those voids?
Yeah, I think you have to get like really clear on what you want out of your office, and then say, okay, well then here's what I want. This is my bus, and this is how many seats are on my bus, and these are the people I need to sit in these seats. And then
that was the question, the answer to your question, where I came full circle.
Yeah.
Is you can only so from a profitability standpoint, you only have so many CAs that it makes sense from a profitability standpoint.
Yep.
So they need to be high level employees. And I've made the problem in the past of like, well, this person's into numbers, so they'll be good at this. And this person's just a smiling face, so they can do this. You need multifunctional, high level employees. And sometimes they take a while to find. So sorry, that was the actual answer, getting around full circle to your question.
Yeah, no, I really wanted to hear your perspective just because I have a girl, Logan, our office manager. She's absolutely phenomenal. She dropped out of college to work in my office, and I'm trying to give her that like college level experience of like investment and learning. And we're starting to like climb up closer to that 300 number. And so we're like, okay, well, we're going to need somebody else. And then my other CA, she's my virtual assistant. She worked part-time for us, but she's pregnant with her fourth kid. And so she's like, she was already only working 6 hours a week. And she's like, hey, I need to reduce like my responsibility and stuff, but I still want to be useful. Like, I don't want to like all of those things. And so I'm like, well,
Hard to be useful in less than 6 hours a week. But anyways,
I know exactly right. And so it's like you
she
can
doesn't
do a
listen to
lot
the
of
podcast, hopefully.
yeah, you can do a lot of things. And so I was like, well, we need to like we just need to have a system and we need to have clear cut expectations so everybody is because we only have that's what I said too. Like we only have so many seats on the bus, right? The bus is going to keep moving and your stop might just be the stop. And so then Zach and I have had that conversation. I know Zach has a lot of things that he's maybe wanting to talk about, but
Not necessarily. I want to focus while we have Lauren on, but I had my intuition. I'm learning very similar because I've been stewing on a staffing thing for the last like 6 months, and finally made the decision. And amazing, my Sunday scaries and like my anxiety on Sunday nights and Monday mornings was absent for the first time in 6 months, and I couldn't figure out what it was. It didn't matter if we had 10 new patients on the books, if we had a record week, if I was going on vacation, which I haven't done. But anyways, like it didn't matter what was going on. I just had like this immense anxiety, and it was
why did you have the anxiety? So like in hindsight, what was it?
the energy of one of our staff on Mondays is like
so she had to
palpable.
She had to go.
Yeah.
hey,
And
good for you. I didn't know that that changed.
Yeah.
I'm proud of
Yeah.
you for having that conversation.
Yeah. So had to have
did she quit or did you have to let her go?
It's actually he. So he's my first.
Sorry. How
No, you're
sexist
fine.
of me.
Most people assume.
He slays the day.
And but he was my first CA. He's been with us since like we were seeing 50 a week. And my coach Ron Ryder is very much like your CA at 50 to 100 a week is probably not the same CA at 300. And he's also trying to start his own business, and so like it's a catering business, and so they're bumping Friday to Sunday, so he's not getting that rest that he's needing. And I finally just had like a sit down conversation of like, hey man, like we're stuck, and I'm not blaming you. I've also been doing other things, and like, no, I can be doing my part, but like every Monday I come in and it's like my least favorite day. When Mondays used to be like, I was like, I'm the weird guy that like loves Mondays, kind of hates Saturday, Sundays. But I'm like, what's going on? And it was because anytime I would come in, it's like, oh, I'm just not feeling good, or like long weekend, tired. And so I'm like, what's going on? And we had this conversation. He's like, I've been feeling the same way for about 6 months. And like, I'm very committed to you and I want to stay here, but I also know like if it's my time to go, it's my time to go. So I didn't necessarily like fire him on the spot.
I mean, it sounds like he resigned.
He kind of did. So
it was a great conversation on both ends.
Yeah, it was really, I was very impressed. I hate confrontation.
Did he collect unemployment?
No, he's still working. So yeah.
Oh, this is awkward.
Yeah. So he's gonna.
If you want to have I'm also very good at getting patient or employees who are quietly quitting, basically, to just quit.
Yeah.
Through kind candor and conversation. So
yeah. So I don't know if he was necessarily quietly quitting because again, he's my first employee, and so I don't necessarily know what that looks like. I felt like his effort in some instances, but there hasn't been that growth. So that's something I've been working through. And so I've been, he's gonna leave within the next month, and then we'll have 2 CAs.
Cool. Again. That sounds like entrepreneurship in a nutshell. Of like, that was a thing that you had to deal with and figure out how to navigate, and you're gonna have to figure out how to navigate that probably 10 to 50 more times in the rest of your career. Like it's
with that, like, what is something you mentioned when you're 85 and you're looking back and you're like, why did I spend so much time spewing over this, or really thinking I was down in the dumps? When you first started 14 years ago, in those first 1 to 3 years, what are some things you spent a lot of time on that looking back you're like, that really wasn't that important?
Insurance.
We agree.
I was fully a network. I mean, I really, my heart smiled when you guys, before we started recording, and you're talking about how you guys have these weekly conversations, with talking to each other. And I had that startup buddy, right? She was down in La Crosse. I remember, we had 6 people on the schedule for the day. And so we're like trying to fill out this damn Medicare application. And we're like, what does line 17B even mean? Like, yeah, insurance. There are some horror stories of being a network with insurance. That's for sure. So that's my honest answer is the first 3 years, insurance navigated, or it dictated how we practiced, how care plans got communicated or lack thereof. I also, during that time though, keep in mind, I didn't come from a super principled school.
Yep.
So I didn't realize the incongruency, because like Lauryn as the chiropractor that I would become was not who I graduated as. I didn't graduate with like, oh man, I'm not a principled chiropractor. And I'm not saying they're not, or whoever, I'm just saying like, I didn't know that there was this like battle within our profession of like chiropractors who use the word subluxation or not. And like this, that. So like, I was just head down, like I need to start my practice and I need to make some money. And I'm of course going to take insurance. And
that's
just
what you
like,
saw everyone else do. Yeah. Nice.
That's actually like a really great segue. I have this like really big question that I was talking to with my office manager, Logan. But you mentioned like, when I first started, I didn't know Lauryn, the chiropractor, who I was to become. And I feel like there becomes like this really pivotal time where like God gives you the opportunities. He's saying like, hey, look at this new door. It used to be locked and now it's open for you, right? You just have to turn the handle. But it's for us to like take that step through. And I talk about it all the time, these like evolutionary points, these like quantum choice points, like where your whole life can change around it. What are some of like those internal signals that you feel, or some of the things that you notice in your life where you're like getting that prompt to take that, like, hey, it's time for you to take the next step. It's time for you to level up. This is an evolutionary time. What do you feel like that?
Well, I'm very stubborn and a very slow learner. So when it comes to this, like a lot of times it will be, I'm stagnating in practice and I'm doing all the things, air quotes, right? But we have to remember when we answer that question that God don't give a fuck about your bank account.
That's true.
He gives 0 fucks. And most of us, that's like everything we care about in our practice, besides like, yes, helping people. So like most
but
of
they're
us,
directly related, which I think we often forget. It's like
right.
more people you help, typically the bank account should be better.
So like most of the time where like God has really needed to like knock me upside the head and be like, there is a bigger picture quantum moment for you. It wasn't like, so you can now 10x your practice. It was like on a personal realm and like, or a relationship realm with my husband or my children. Or, like a lot of times it was a personal thing that then was going to play out in my practice. And so because career and practice numbers are like one of the biggest ways that I'll start paying attention if there's not growth. There's a lot of sneaky ways that like I may not pay as much attention to, but like we stop growing as a business and I'm like tuned in and I'm like, what is going on? What's this? We start making moves, we start making changes. But again, in that scenario, my focus for months is going to be on like, how come we're not seeing more people? How come the numbers are down? How come this? And it's not from this, like, what lesson, like, is this a moment where I need to go inward and see how I'm showing up as a leader and showing up as a human? So it just takes me, I feel, a little bit longer for me to make some of those quantum shifts because I keep it very like business focused. And then I'm like, okay. And then, and I would love to say, again, I would love to say that every time I've had one of these, there's been massive growth financially on the other side. I'm going through kind of a third one right now-ish. I mean, again, like
B3.
for like the last, 2 years, a year and a half. And I'm so at peace with some of the things that we're doing and some of the pieces that are clicking in. I can tell you the previous two, there was massive like I did the inner work, and then yes, there was like abundance, financial abundance and patient abundance and all like vacations and all of this stuff. But again, I don't know that anybody should go into that level of interpersonal work with that being the hopeful
Cool.
outcome, because
Oh, like
God
money.
doesn't care.
That's good.
God doesn't care.
That's
Like
good.
there may just be a lesson that you need to learn and you're stagnating. And on the other end, you might make $50,000 less a year.
Mm.
And he's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah,
I'm like,
whatever. Who cares, right?
but you're a better person. Lauren, aren't you happy? So
Right.
That gives me kind of some insight into Zach, just because Zach is the 3 as well. Like you guys have like that same personality type. But me, like being the 4, like every time I see like things not move in the business or anything, I never be like, okay, well, what system is broken or what am I not doing? I always am like, okay, well, what's wrong with me?
Oh, no.
Like that's my
I'm like,
4
where's
that
the
comes out.
bottlenecks? Where's like,
Yep. I started looking, and we've been stuck at like at 135, 149 for so long, like probably 6 months, and it's been
do you
extremely
know what
frustrating.
your PVA is? So like,
PVA,
yep.
it takes me a second. I don't think it's dyslexia, but like even working out, like I
Not
get
an
sets
audible
and
alert.
reps kind of messed up
Yeah.
sometimes. But PVA, we're at about 32.
Okay. So
And
yeah, you got to figure out how to keep your patients longer. You got to get that. And I only calculate PVA on an annual basis because it's just looking at it a month to month. If you had low new patients, it's going to be super high. If you
Right.
had, but like 32 is good. But a cash practice, like if you're insurance, then the average is 8 to 12. But like for a cash practice and a family practice, like you're growing, that's where I would look first, of like that should be double. And I don't like shoulds or this or that, but like that can be double.
Yeah.
And that gets you off of that needing that new patient, so like really when you're looking at growth, you're looking at retention and new patients.
Yeah.
And it's probably one of those.
Yeah. Are you gonna be at Denise's like retention summit with Chiro Intensive?
Elise's.
At least
Denise is going to be
Denise
there.
is gonna be there. Yeah.
Yeah. Denise. Yes.
But it's at Denise's office, correct?
Is it at Denise's office?
No,
I don't know if
maybe
it's
not.
at Denise's office as much as it's a place Denise recommended.
Gotcha. Yeah, my fiance used to work with Denise. She was her like associate. So Denise is like my fairy
Oh,
godmother.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Chiropractic is such a small world.
yeah. We called it, yeah, Denise is like our fairy godmother. We're getting married at her lake house in a week. And so
These are all my favorite people. These are like all my favorite people in the world. These are all my friends now.
yeah, that's so cool. How do you feel like your like personal life has changed like as your practice has grown? Like because I feel like Zach and I, like as we like are climbing up like into these new levels, like you stop hanging around like all the people you hung out in school and like you just start like getting more on like this train, especially in the peds world. I feel like the peds world is like really small, especially like the cash peds world. And so like everybody kind of knows each other. And I think it's cool. How do you feel like your personal life has like developed as a result of, chiropractic?
I have it's harder to be, and this might just be more my personality as I continue to really hone in my purpose and like where I want to spend my time, invest my time, is I'm finding it's harder to find local, just like random people that I can grab coffee with in my town. Um, it's like you just hit up against as this like not high volume, like just this like super achiever growth mindset, like yeah, this mentality of like I want my relationship with my spouse to be incredible and I want to 10x my practice, but I also want to invest in real estate, but I also want to make sure that I'm pouring out my message into previous, like all of this stuff. And then also, of course, I didn't freaking vaccinate. No, I didn't run to like the doctor because I thought my kid had a sinus infection. Like, no, I adjusted them. Like, you just like hit up against all these barriers, like, so there's people at my church that I feel like I can communicate with, but like nobody that I'm like, okay, but how does God help a super high achiever, like talking to them about some of those things that I struggle with, like dealing there, or like talking to moms that are just like, I just want to stay at home with my kid. And I was like, oh God, so it's just the more you adult, the more you really find out who you are. And then it's like, you just feel kind of lonely, just really feel lonely of like, now all of a sudden, where are my people isn't like, where are the people I spend 9 to 5 sitting and studying anatomy and nat and phys at this school with, who also love rugby and love drinking on the weekends. Like, that's college, right?
Yeah.
But then you like, just as you get older, all your preferences are like, I know but I don't really want to go on a vacation with that person because she just bashes her husband the whole time. Or like, there's just so many different layers to adulting and friendships. That's hard.
Yeah, that's what Kate and I were just talking about too. Like as we're growing, and now especially since she's moved from Denise's office like into ours, it's just been so much more like because I mean, she just brings other people in that. So now, I mean, we just work together. So we're trying to be like really intentional about that. But then we realized like, like for us to be around people who are like on the same track as us, it's gonna have to be we're gonna be Zoom calling a lot, or we'll have text message friends, at least for now, this season in our life. And then we'll have kids, and then we'll be friends with our kids' parents.
Yeah. That's where it's like, well, we're friends with them because we spend every weekend together at a soccer tournament or whatever. But yeah, you find those people that are like-minded by going to those events, and you're like, you care about this too. Cool.
That's great. What would you say now? Like you're going through this third version, as we kind of joked about, but what are things that you're currently working on as a CEO and a multi-passionate chiropreneur, as you've kind of coined the term? What are some of those things that you're noticing you're having to work on?
Okay, P.S. Can we just have a moment for one of the funniest? I don't know if you listened to the reason I'm sorry, come back to that question in a sec, but you just said I coined that term. Did you by chance listen to the episode where I talked to the animal or the vet Chiro?
Not
It's
yet.
okay if you didn't. So there's this really funny moment where I'm interviewing someone on my podcast. And she's like talking and she's like creating a course for like animal chiros. And she's like, yeah, I call them my multi-passionate chiropreneurs. And I'm like, that's mine. And like, I was like half joking, but really not. And she was confused. And I got so many DMs being like, girlfriend, like picked the wrong phrase to use with you. So anyways, thank you for saying that. So what was the question again? Something about multi-passionate chiropreneurs.
What are you noticing from a personal development side of things that you're having to work on?
It's all comes back to self-awareness of realizing where my tendencies are. My tendencies are impulsivity. My tendencies are to add to the plate without subtracting. My tendencies are to like hold on to something that may not be working a little too long. And then when I am ready, just to like be done with it and like burn that bridge. So so it is really like being mindful of like, okay, this is what my default wants to be. And then how do I just live life through the filter of that awareness? So like with impulsivity comes, I have a lot of big emotions and I feel them fast. Okay. But knowing that there's like, that's not healthy to like, even honestly, to expose my husband to, like, that's like of the safest space, but like, you can't do that with employees. You can't do that with patients. You can't. So it's really become this filter of like knowing like, oh, that's where I want to go. But like, hold up. How do I actually present? Another thing is like, I like to add without subtracting. And so for instance, and I need a lot of validity. Like I need a lot of validation. I know that I struggle with like, have I proven myself to these other people? Like other people can just be so much more important to me than like my core people. And I'm like, yeah. I love you. I want them to love me. Well, I know that now. And so again, that's included in my like little pasta filter now of like how I put things through life. So I got approached to speak at an event this September, and I could have made it work, but it kind of bumped up against a trip that my husband and I were talking about going on. And like old Lauryn would have been like, we'll either do both, but then my kids would have been the one to kind of sacrifice that of like, because I would have been gone for a long time. I also, my energy would be not ideal from that, from just kind of like burning the candle at both ends. Or I would have sought the validation and like of speaking on stage as more important and like, oh, we'll just do that trip another time. And so being able to go like, okay, that's what my brain is processing and how to make this decision. And then again, just giving it that time to reflect and go like, okay, do I need this? What do I need? And making that decision from a good heart gut place versus some of those default patterns. And then I tell myself I'm proud of myself of like, looking and going like, hey, you handled that differently. Like, good, because I don't know if it's just my personality or if this is something, but like, it's really easy. Like growth is just never ending with this personal growth. And so, and like, it all is kind of like fine lines of the same core issue.
Yep.
So it's really easy when you've been doing self-work as a leader or a spouse or a parent or whatever, as for a decade, 2 decades. And then like something triggers and you go to that default pattern and it's really easy to be like, you're the same damn person. You haven't changed at all. You still did this. This is still you. You're never going to change. And so like I found that the noticing those nuanced ways that I handle a down week at the clinic, how I protect my employees from my energy, how I protect my tone when a mistake happens, how I attempt to not bring it home. I'm not so good at that one. But there's just awareness around it. So that's kind of the continuation, is that there is no end, but just like continually being very self-aware of what your defaults are and how you want to show up differently.
That's great. And I had to roll my eyes, not at you, but because again, same things. So yeah, words of affirmation aren't necessarily like a love language; they're more of a necessity. So
unless it's from somebody that you already know that they love you, and then you're like, I don't need that.
Yeah, like if Morgan, and she'll listen to this because she loves you, but it's also like she tells me like you're doing a great job. I'm like, yeah, okay, but
yeah,
I don't hear that from you.
So I have found that I will accept compliments from my husband on my work. So like when he says, hey, I listened to that episode, you did a really good job with that guest. I'm like, oh, but like, there are other things that's just like, you're just such a good mom. I'm like, yeah.
That's not important.
So I guess I need specific details. I need more specifics from him.
That's fair. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, as we kind of wrap up, we try to kind of close our show with this conversation every time.
I do have, before we go into our last question, I have a guest question, if that's okay. Yeah. And I want to read it so that I don't. It is from Morgan.
You have a guest question.
Yep.
You're stealing your show.
I know. Morgan would like to know your favorite fantasy book recommendation other than ACOTAR.
Okay. Other than ACOTAR? That's a good question.
Is that the Thorn and Roses?
I would say I really like From Blood and Ash by Jennifer Armentrout. And then there's a prequel to it. Huh?
I'm going to shake my head like I know what you're talking about.
Yep, totally know what that is. And then there's a prequel by the same author. I usually don't love prequels. But like this is really just a separate storyline. That there's a whole prequel to it that I also really, really love. Yep.
Cool.
That's my recommendation to Morgan.
Yeah. Awesome. So all the smut readers, that's your
hey, there is storylines in there. I've tried a couple just straight up smut books, and I'm like, there's no plot, there's no character development, so like I do have some standards, Zach.
Okay. Sorry.
There may be only 1 or 2 sections in 800 pages. Okay.
I don't know what you're talking about. Caitlin doesn't.
Well, then I feel bad for you, Spencer. You need to buy your wife some books.
I know. Well, she might read them behind my back, and I just don't know. I just don't know. Anyway. But anyway, our closing question for our guest.
That's not your closing what you do with every guest.
No. Our closing question is always, what now? So what's next? What can we expect from She Slays the Day coming up in the future? And what can we be excited to look forward to for you?
I don't have a like specific thing of like launching November or whatever, but like where my head is at is like, I'm very happy with the multi-passionate chiropreneur. I love the group of chiropractors that I get to work with. It's a lot of chiropractors who've been in practice at least 3 years. They just kind of want more profitability systems, but doing it through the lens of like what brings them happy. So that's going great. Love it. We'll do our 3rd year in 2025. But there is this space within chiropractic that I've been really called to, and I don't know how I'm going to show up for this group, but it is the associates. I think there is so much coaching and there are so many programs and there are so many things for the CEO, and that's awesome. That's awesome. But I think we have too many docs going into entrepreneurship because they're like, so am I a nobody? Like there's nothing for me unless I own. I don't. And so I want to figure out how to create something for them that just allows them to feel seen in this profession and fulfilled, really fulfilled. And with that, I kind of say like with the multi-passionate chiropreneur, we're helping chiros get more profitability so they can start paying associates a little better, because that is definitely an issue that we have of like, underpayment. And so it's kind of like multiple wheels all kind of working together within the profession of like, but trying to help associates get that freedom, that financial freedom and that creative outlet that they think only owning their own business will do, because the burnout rate is hardcore. So
yeah.
So I don't know what that's going to look
that's
like.
huge. That's huge. I think I've heard I think it was you and Steph talking. I wasn't sure if it was on your podcast or her podcast, but basically like how you have an associate who loves to travel and you're like, make like an Instagram about all your travel or something like that. And you're like, that could be a creative outlet. So I think that's going to be huge. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of chiropractors don't know how to assess profit in their business, and so they just have all these problems and they hand it off to the associate, and then they're like, dude, you suck. And that's not how it is, right? Your associate's a reflection of you. So
yeah,
that's great. Awesome. Can you tell everybody where to find you at on Instagram? I'm sure it's hard.
So Instagram is She Slays Podcast, I think is my handle. I think. I don't know. And then the podcast is She Slays a Day, and it is wherever you find your podcasts.
Nice.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. Yeah, thanks so much for joining us for the What Now podcast. We look forward to hearing all the feedback and potentially having you back on for a 2.0 version. But other than that, let us know what you guys think. Definitely tag her as you post and share. And we look forward to the next episode of the What Now podcast. Peace.
That's right. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at What Now Chiro Podcast. Peace. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the What Now podcast. If you took something valuable away, feel free to share it with a friend, post it on your socials, or give us a 5-star review. We'll see y'all next time. Peace.